Bobby Petrino took over the Louisville program 13 years ago and took it from a decent mid-level program to top 5 status twice in the national rankings to complete the season. Let that sink in. Bobby Petrino's back after a decent first campaign, back with the Ville in the ACC. He looks for more success in a division that includes Clemson and Florida State. We bring in a Mike McDaniel of Inside the ACC to help us track the Cardinals. And Mike, it's a Louisville situation where, of course, Bobby Petrino loves to sling the football all over the place, wide open offense. That's the first thing we think of when we think Louisville and Bobby Petrino. But it could be difficult this season because there's some question marks at quarterback.
Yeah, it could have been worse for year one for Petrino, huh? Coming back to Louisville, goes 9-4, 5-3 in the conference, beats Notre Dame, has a lot of momentum going into this season with the way Louisville played down the stretch. They're going to roll with Reggie Bonnafon, it looks like, at quarterback. Petrino has mentioned multiple times to a couple different media outlets that if the season started today, which obviously there's a few more weeks left until that happens, but if the season started today, Bonnafon would be the guy. In a limited role, they were rotating a lot of guys in and out of the lineup last year at quarterback, but in a limited role, he threw for 864 yards and 5 touchdown passes, completed only 50% of his passes, which is a little bit low for the amount that they throw the ball. But his dual threat and his youth is kind of what separates him in this quarterback race. They had veteran Will Garnder. He played a decent amount last year, but he blew out his knee. He's had all sorts of issues staying on the field due to injury. And then they got Kyle Bolin, and they have transfer Ty Ferguson, who apparently has done a nice job in camp pushing Bonnafon. But so far, it doesn't seem like anybody's going to surpass him. And Bonnafon looks like he could be the starter week one.
So we look at the running backs and the wide receivers. Michael Dyer gone. Of course, he came in from Auburn, played fairly well there in Louisville. Brandon Radcliffe replaces him. Devonte Parker, dynamic talent at wide receiver. He's gone off to the NFL draft. And again, Bobby Petrino hangs his hat and reputation on offense and big scoring offenses. But there's not a whole lot that we can point to as proven commodities at the skill position players.
Yeah, Michael Dyer had a nice career there for Louisville after having the issues post-Auburn with a national championship run there. And then he had a couple of years there where he was kind of in flux, but he came into a nice situation at Louisville and played well for them. But now that he's gone, they got Brandon Radcliffe, who's going to be the starter, it looks like, as of right now. Radcliffe averaged about 98 yards the final 3 games of the season, each of the final 3 games of the season against Notre Dame, Kentucky, and Georgia. So those are 3 pretty solid college football programs. Kentucky, again, is up and coming with Mark Stoops. At receiver, they're real thin. They're going to be relying on James Quick. He's a former 5-star recruit. He's going to be a junior. He's had off-the-field transgressions, some issues that have kept him out of some contests. And when he's gotten in, he just hasn't performed that well. So they're going to rely on him to take the next step and actually live up to his expectations as that 5-star recruit that he came into school as. And aside from that, they got Jaquai Savage coming in from Texas A&M. They have Jamari Staples, another transfer. The 2 of them are going to come in and play receiver 2 and receiver 3 in that offense and try to replace Devonte Parker, who was just so dynamic for Louisville, was the go-to guy without a doubt. And anytime you lose a guy like that, you're going to be looking for some young guys to step up. But with James Quick, we just don't really know what we have. I mean, he's a 5-star, but he's, kind of, fluttered around here the first couple of years. And we got two transfers with some game experience at other schools, but it remains to be seen how they'll adjust to the Louisville offense in their first year. So they are quite thin at the skill positions, and the development of those guys will ultimately determine how well the Louisville offense plays.
Yeah, their first taste of ACC play inside the conference was a home game against Miami last season, and their defensive front was very impressive in that game, harassing Brad Kaya, dominating the game in the second half. Cardinals win over Miami, and that was a precursor to some exceptional defensive line talent moving on to the NFL. The defense seems to be decent, but I don't know if they can tackle the likes of Clemson and Florida State in that division. So set us up with the Cardinals on D.
Yeah, well, on defense, they're only returning 4 starters, but the guys they are returning are very good. Now, they're also, like you said, they lost some of the key players on their defensive line, but they're bringing in a former Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year out of TCU, Devonte Fields, he's coming in weak side defensive end. He's a big-time player and a nice get for Bobby Petrino and his staff coming in as a transfer. So he'll be a very nice get for them, and I think he'll play very well up front and help ease the blow a little bit from losing all those players in their front seven. Now their linebackers, though, have been solid. Keith Kelsey, he's a fifth-year senior. He's one of the more underrated players in the ACC, especially on the defensive end. He doesn't get a ton of recognition, but he makes a ton of big-time plays. And Louisville's linebackers are the veteran group of that front seven, so they'll have to continue to play well this season as they have in the prior 2 years. And you look at their defensive line with Devonte Fields. Hopefully he shores up things a bit. Back end of the secondary, they're going to be very young there, but they got Josh Harvey-Clemens. He's a safety. He's the veteran leader of that group. He's probably going to be an NFL draftee next April if he comes out, and he's a big-time player. They're going to be relying on him to get everybody lined up and everybody set, and he and Keith Kelsey are going to try to lead that defense there in Louisville.
Yeah, Devonte Fields, again, is a complete freak who kind of was off the scene based on some off-the-field issues, but to be the defensive player in the Big 12 as a freshman, so he wasn't the freshman defensive player of the year, he was the overall D player of the year in the Big 12 as a freshman. He is a special player. Hopefully he's put his issues behind him, and we'll see him chasing quarterbacks in the ACC. This is a pretty impressive schedule, Mike, from the standpoint that usually if you look through college football, which I have, typically there's one toughie that's scheduled non-conference, 3 softies, 1 toughie to varying degrees. Louisville has that annual date with Kentucky, which, yes, the Wildcats not a power in the SEC, but they've got back-to-back top 20 recruiting classes, so Kentucky should be an improved football team. Louisville goes there to conclude the season in Lexington, but they start the season scheduling another SEC team, and this one considered a college football playoff contender in Auburn. So that kind of highlights the schedule, the bookend SEC matchups, and then in between, of course, they've got to tackle Florida State and Clemson in that division. And again, I look at the out-of-division games, which include not so tough here with Virginia and Pitt, the 2 second-to-last games of the season for Louisville.
Yeah, that Auburn game is neutral site there at the Georgia Dome, but with Auburn, Alabama being so close in proximity to Atlanta, Georgia, you have to think that they're going to pack the stands full of, raucous Auburn Tiger fans, and that's not going to be an easy matchup, and I would be actually pretty surprised to see Louisville come out on top there. But you look at their schedule, they have Clemson at home on a Thursday night. That's going to be a big game for them. If they can get over the hump there against Clemson, I think that would also be an upset. But with the schedule they have here, it's not out of the realm of possibility. I think they could be 1-2 through their first 3 games, and Petrino and company would be pretty disappointed with that. But they have a pretty tough schedule there just right off the jump with scheduling 2 top 25 teams in their first 3 games. They do have Samford on September 26th and Houston September 12th. Those 2 games should be wins, it's safe to say. And they have another tough matchup, a very underrated NC State team at Carter Finley Stadium in Raleigh, Saturday, October 3rd. So that's right after the Samford game. And that's going to be a tough game as well. So at the beginning of their schedule is absolutely brutal. And then they have an open date before going to Florida State. I mean, this is going to be a pretty tough start here for Louisville. And they could have 3 or 4 losses here in the first 5 or 6 games. And they could be a pretty good football team still, even after that.
Yeah, unless things change it drastically, they're going to be a decided underdog against Auburn, Clemson, and Florida State. If they slip up one other time, then you're looking at an 8-4 campaign, which is, for Louisville standards, pretty marginal. I know that they would like to compete with Florida State and Clemson in the ACC, but it's got 8-4 written on it. We'll see what they're able to do. But, of course, they've got a fairly easy ride if they can weather the storm through October 17th and that date at Tallahassee. Mike McDaniel joining us from inside the ACC to break down Louisville football, coming off 9-4 in 2014 and their second season in the ACC. Mike, thanks so much for the time.
Appreciate it, Mark. Thanks.